She wore no badge, carried no weapon. Yet in that moment, she faced the kind of danger no one should endure. An officer, dripping with arrogance and hate, promised to erase her from existence. His target? A black woman who had spent her life protecting the very country he swore to serve. What happened when he learned she was the head of the FBI is a story that should shake every corner of America. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air feels sharp but familiar. Special Agent Maya Reynolds had just wrapped up a long day in Washington, her mind already drifting to the quiet comfort of home. To most, she was just another woman driving through the city, a face in the crowd. But beneath the surface was a life defined by discipline, service, and a fierce commitment to justice. As the first black woman to ever lead the FBI, Maya had spent years navigating challenges most couldn't imagine. Tonight, though, she wasn't thinking about politics or power. She was thinking about a hot cup of tea and a good night's rest. But just a few miles from her door, something shifted. A shadow of flashing red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror. At first, she thought nothing of it. Traffic stops were part of life. Yet, in the pit of her stomach, a weight began to form. This wasn't a routine stop. This was the start of something that would strip away the illusion of safety and expose just how dangerous ignorance and hate could be. The patrol car trailed her for 3 blocks before the siren finally wailed. Maya slowed to the curb, hands steady on the wheel, outwardly calm, but her pulse had quickened. She had been through countless briefings on officer conduct, had trained agents on de-escalation. But tonight, none of that training could erase the unease curling in her chest. The officer stepped out, his shadow stretching under the harsh glare of the street lamp. His walk was slow, deliberate, like someone savoring control. He didn't greet her, didn't ask for her license. Instead, he leaned down to her window, his face twisted with disdain, and whispered a sentence that made her blood run cold. "I can make you disappear, and no one will ever find you." Maya's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He had no idea who he was talking to, no idea that the woman in front of him oversaw the very agency with the power to investigate him. But in that moment, her title didn't matter. She wasn't the FBI director. She was a black woman, alone on a dark street, facing a man with a badge, a gun, and the arrogance to think he could erase her existence. He told her to get out of the car. She hesitated, scanning the quiet street for witnesses. There were none. Her heart pounded louder than the hum of the idling engine. Every step she took onto that pavement felt like stepping deeper into a trap. He circled her slowly, eyes cold, muttering about people like you under his breath. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing in, the echo of every story where power had been abused and justice had been denied. When she asked the reason for the stop, his smirk only grew. He accused her of suspicious driving, of being somewhere she didn't belong. Each baseless claim dripped with the same poison she had spent her career fighting to eradicate. And then, without warning, he reached for his radio. His voice crackled through the air, distorted and low. "We've got one to process. Stand by." Maya's mind raced. She knew what process could mean in the wrong hands. Her phone was in her pocket, but reaching for it could be seen as a threat. Speaking up could escalate the situation, yet staying silent could be worse. She could almost hear her father's voice, reminding her that survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride, even when every fiber of your being burned with rage. The night air felt heavier now, as if the street itself was holding its breath. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, another set of headlights turned onto the street, slowing as they approached. Was this backup, or something far more dangerous? The second patrol car rolled to a stop, its headlights flooding the street in blinding white. Maya's vision blurred for a moment, her breath shallow, as 2 more officers stepped out, hands resting on their weapons. The first officer's smirk widened. "This one's about to learn," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. The air was electric with threat. Her mind replayed every name, every face of those who hadn't survived encounters like this. She thought of the mothers who buried their children without answers, of the families left hollow by a system that claimed to protect them. And now, she was standing in the center of it, an unarmed black woman surrounded by armed men who saw her as less than human. One officer moved closer, flashlight glaring in her face, forcing her to squint. "Step back against the hood," he ordered, his tone dripping with contempt. Maya's feet felt anchored to the pavement, every instinct telling her to stand her ground. But she knew that defiance could be a death sentence. The first officer's hand brushed the handle of his gun, a silent threat hanging in the cold night air. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could almost hear the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in sync with the officer's slow, deliberate steps. The words, "Make her disappear," echoed over and over in her head, each repetition heavier than the last. And then, something shifted. A fourth car pulled up, this one unmarked. The door opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, stern-faced, his ID clipped to his belt. Without hesitation, he strode toward the group. The officers froze. Maya didn't move, her body trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the sheer force of holding herself together. Because in the next 30 seconds, their world was about to change. The man in the suit didn't waste a second. He flashed his credentials, his voice cutting sharp through the night. The shift was immediate. The officers' postures stiffened, their hands pulling away from their weapons. In seconds, the tension cracked, but the damage was already done. The first officer, the one who had threatened her, suddenly looked small. His smirk was gone, replaced by the dawning realization that the woman he had tried to intimidate was his ultimate superior, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But this wasn't about status. It wasn't about power. Because in that moment, Maya wasn't thinking about victory. She was thinking about survival. She drove home that night, the city lights blurring past, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She had faced armed terrorists, coordinated national security operations, and stared down dangerous criminals. But this was different. This was a reminder that no title, no accomplishment, no badge could shield her from the reality of being a black woman in America. And that is the truth that should haunt us all. If the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the country could be threatened with disappearance because of the color of her skin, what does that mean for those without the badge, without the title, without the witnesses? This wasn't just Maya's story. It's the story of countless voices silenced before they could speak, countless lives altered in moments like these. We can't call it rare. We can't call it an exception. We have to call it what it is. The question now is, how many more have to vanish before we decide that enough is enough?